Today, I am sharing with you a vegetarian/vegan-friendly Nigerian-inspired native jollof rice. This one-pot dish celebrates some of the most unique and delicious flavors and cooking techniques from the giants of Africa. If you want to see how I make this recipe, please keep watching. For the base of the stew, I'm going to be using 2 types of peppers, a hot habanero pepper as well as a red bell pepper, and I will also be using 1 tomato. The tomato really helps to cut through all of the sweetness of the red bell pepper, while the red bell pepper adds some sweetness, some flavor, and as well as a bright, vibrant color. If you don't like your food too spicy, you can use another type of pepper or you can completely omit the pepper. I will suggest eating this and making this with some kind of spicy pepper because it really does give that close to authentic flavor you find in a lot of Nigerian dishes that tend to use more pepper than the average person. I processed it all in the food processor. I did it in 2 batches because my food processor is not the biggest. Then on to cooking the stew base. So for the base, I'm using some red palm oil. This is quite essential to the recipe. It gives a nice flavor and it gives a nice color. In that, I sauteed some chopped onions and I cooked that down for a few minutes, medium heat till it had softened up. Then I added in my dawa dawa, also known as iru, fermented locust beans. Now, native jollof is really celebrating the indigenous and local flavors in this part of West Africa. So the iru is really, really important. It adds not only a unique smell, but also a nice umami flavor. It just really makes this dish what it is. Unfortunately, I can't provide any substitutions. I will really, really encourage you to check it out. I am using the powdered version, but most often you can also get them as whole seeds that are dried. All you need to do is rehydrate them and then put them in the sauce. So I added that into my pot and I just let it just incorporate a little bit for about 2 to 3 minutes before I added in my blended tomato and pepper mixture. I gave that a very good mix. My pot is at medium temperature now so that it doesn't bubble over. When tomatoes and peppers have a lot of water, you tend to get a lot of bubbling. Then I let it cook for about 10 minutes just so that the water starts to evaporate and the stew starts to cook. Then I added in my spices. The spices are pretty simple for this recipe. I have some garlic powder, onion powder, and some Cameroon pepper, as well as my nori and mushroom mix, blending up some dried seaweed and mushroom. It adds a subtle fishy flavor, but also a ton of umami. So that goes right into the stew, as well as a mushroom bouillon cube. You can use whatever bouillon cube you prefer. I like to use vegetable. Today I was trying out a mushroom one because mushrooms have a really nice umami flavor and we're just trying to pack in as much umami in this dish as possible. Usually native jollof rice is chock full of fish, meats, cow skin, a whole diversity of animal proteins. For this vegan version, we're not going to be using any of those animal products, so it's really imperative to use a variety of plant-based ingredients to really build a solid flavor. So for added texture, I am using some dried mushrooms. I will also be including some jackfruit and smoked tofu later on. Since these mushrooms were rehydrated from dry, I did include them quite early in the cooking process so that they can really absorb more of the stew flavor as they continue to hydrate. I let my stew cook again for another 10 minutes for it to reduce. And as it's cooking, you start to see that the oil is separating to the top. This is a really good sign that your stew is close to ready. As my stew is close to ready, I am adding in some canned jackfruit. Your add-ins, you can use whatever you prefer. As I mentioned, people make native jollof rice in so many different ways, depending on personal preference. For my jackfruit, I made sure to wash and rinse it very well just to get rid of that brine flavor and then remove the seeds, and then I put it into my stew. As I'm cooking, I'm always checking to make sure that I have enough seasoning in my pot. You want to be able to adjust, adding enough salt, enough spices, especially because when you add the rice into the dish, it will dilute all the flavors and you don't want flavorless native jollof. So I always make sure to check and adjust accordingly. So I let the jackfruit cook in the stew for a bit, and then I added in some scent leaf. So scent leaf, also known as African basil, is quite useful in native jollof rice. It adds yet another layer of local flavor. Even though it's in the basil family, I personally think that when it's dried, it kind of smells like oregano. So if you don't have scent leaf, feel free to use oregano if you want to, or you can completely omit this. I got this dry at a Nigerian store, and then I'm just crimpling it up in my hands to make it more of a powder form, and then added it into my stew and mixed everything together. Then I put in some smoked tofu for some more texture, for some plant-based protein, and the smoked tofu has a really nice flavor. All of this is just to make sure that our rice is super duper delicious. Now that I'm content with my stew, I am adding in some long grain rice. I pre-washed this before. It is not parboiled. A lot of Nigerians use parboiled rice. Again, Nigeria is a big country, so there's lots of diversity. I, as a Ghanaian, prefer jasmine rice. So to meet in the middle, I'm just using regular long grain rice. So I put that into my pot. At this point, I have reduced the heat. I don't want anything to burn. I want everything to cook well. So I incorporated my rice in very well. This also helps me to gauge the amount of water that I need to add. I make sure to give it a good taste. I noticed that it wasn't as seasoned as I wanted it to be, so I doubled all the dry spices that I included and I mixed it with some water to make this broth. You want to make sure that you don't add too much water, otherwise it will be mushy, but adding too little water will extend the cooking time. So I added about 2 cups of rice to about 2.5 cups of water, and I let it cook long and slow at low heat till it was done. I made sure to taste for salt and seasoning till my preferred liking, and then I just let it cook. Delicious. So native jollof rice is one of the many types of local jollof rice that you will get across West Africa. When people think about jollof rice, they rightfully think of a rice dish that is cooked with a very spicy, delicious tomato-based or red-based stew. It doesn't really have a lot of unique ingredients. It truly can be made from products you get at the grocery store. But native jollof rice, along with things like dafaduka or quenqueng, or in some French West African countries, you get riz au gras villageoise, which is quite similar to native jollof rice. These are less popular jollof rices that you only really hear about in certain parts of West Africa, but trust me, they are absolutely delicious, and they're such a great way to display the uniqueness and diversity of ingredients you find in West Africa. Once all the water had looked like it had absorbed, I covered the pot with some tin foil, crimpled the sides to keep the steam in the pot to steam the rice. This way you lock in a lot more flavor, you're not tempted to add more water, and the rice comes out really delicious. So I let my rice cook, just checking on it periodically until the rice was nice and tender. This dish is so delicious. It is one of my favorite ways to cook rice. It is not a traditional native jollof rice in any way, shape, or form because I am veganizing it and making a few adjustments, but it is such a great way to cook rice, and I really encourage you, if you have the chance, to check it out. For some color, I am adding some spinach. So traditionally, people might use things like uziza leaf or ugu leaves. These are, again, local greens that you find in parts of Nigeria. They add extra flavor to the dish, but I can't find any fresh ugu or uziza leaves, and spinach has been recommended as a good alternative for that vibrant color. So this dish looks both red and orange with the green. It's really beautiful on the eyes and even more satisfying on the taste buds. This is my complete dish. It is so good. It is a great one-pot dish. You don't really need to eat it with any sides because there's lots of protein in here, lots of different texture, lots of different flavor. But if you want to try out some plant-based tofu or protein sides, I have a link to a compilation of African-inspired tofu recipes that you can serve with this dish. So that is pretty much it. I served it on a plate to take all of my pictures, and I quickly devoured the entire thing after filming. I have left the recipe in the caption below, so please make sure to check it out. And if you like this style of videos, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more plant-based West African dishes. I will see you in my next video. Bye! See how they whipping that Chevy Impala, speakers souped up, cause you know when they rollin'